Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular business meeting for the District of Squamish on Tuesday, November 19th. Atwalan, Kwiklukumuk, Blasquahomish, Owemio. We are meeting tonight, as always, on the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. Council, may I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Moved by Council French, seconded by Council Race. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Any no's motion from Council? Seeing none, we have one proclamation request. This was a letter from the Minister to declare or proclaim November as Adoption Awareness Month in the District of Squamish. Someone with an adopted member in her family, I'd be happy to put this forward. Second by Council River. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Any consideration of unscheduled public attendance. So this is anyone who feels they have a matter that council needs to hear tonight that can't wait 2 weeks until the next meeting. Seeing none, we'll move on to our business items. We have one timed item, which is Development Variance Permit number 154. And I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Daly.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Brian Daly, Development and Subdivision Coordinator with Community Planning and Infrastructure. I am here tonight to present Development Variance Permit number 154, which requests 2 variances to permit the construction of an accessory dwelling unit at 41559 Government Road in Brackendale. The subject property is located at 41559 Government Road, south of the Brackendale General Store. The property is zoned RS2, and the OCP land use designation is residential neighborhoods. Surrounding properties are also zoned RS2. The applicant is seeking 2 variances to the District of Squamish zoning bylaw to permit the construction of an accessory dwelling unit while maintaining an existing garage on site. The first requested variance seeks to allow more than one accessory building that exceeds 10 square meters in gross floor area. The existing garage was not built to withstand a debris flow hazard event, so the proponents are unable to construct the accessory dwelling unit above the garage without demolishing and rebuilding the entire structure. Section 4.4C allows up to 5 accessory buildings, each not exceeding 10 square meters. In order for the proponent to keep the existing garage and construct a new carriage house, a variance to Section 4.4C to allow one of the 5 buildings to be 180 square meters is requested. The subject property is 156 meters deep, and the proposed carriage house would be located far back in the rear yard to minimize the impact on homes of the neighboring properties. There is a second accessory building that exceeds 10 square meters and is built on a statutory right-of-way for a sanitary line. The proponents intend to demolish this structure prior to occupancy of the carriage house. The second requested variance seeks to increase the maximum height of an accessory dwelling unit from 6.7 meters, 22 feet, to 7.3 meters, 24 feet. To meet the required flood construction level and still be compliant with the 6.7 meter height restriction, the proponents would need to build up the existing grade by roughly 4 feet, or 1.22 meters. In order to limit the amount of fill required, the proponents are requesting a variance of 0.6 meters, or 2 feet, for an overall height of 7.3 meters. Reducing the amount of fill required would minimize the extent of the fill beyond the building footprint, which would limit the amount of fill being brought on site. The overall height of the building from existing grade would not change. The garage ceiling would be 0.6 meters taller as opposed to bringing that amount of fill on site. Staff support the requested variances as they would have limited impact on the neighboring properties, would require less fill to be deposited in a floodway, and would facilitate the construction of a rental unit. Allowing the proponents to maintain the existing garage would prevent the waste that would be generated from its demolition. Legislated and district processes for engagement were followed for this application. A development proposal sign was installed on the property, and the property was posted to the online development showcase. Variance notification were delivered to adjacent properties within 100 meters of the subject property. Staff are recommending that Council authorize the issuance of Development Variance Permit number 154. That concludes my presentation. Any questions?
Thank you. So the public will have an opportunity to speak to these variances, but I'll go to Council first to see if there's any questions.
Just looking at the aerial shot and what's being requested, it seems that a similar request from the neighbors for their own properties might be reasonable. So is there a reason why we wouldn't just consider this as part of our bylaw update, just sort of something that would allow this sort of thing, as opposed to doing this with the variance.
If I may, through the mayor, we could consider it as a bylaw update. However, that would, our zoning bylaw update is it's happening this year. It will go into next year, so it will take longer than the variance process. It is something that we can look at. We will be looking at how to make secondary dwelling units more palatable in existing neighborhoods, but it is more in relation to where the lots are smaller and the buildings are closer together. So I don't know if this would meet that criteria.
Any other questions? Councilor Harper?
Thank you. In relation to in regards to the height variance and the fill, I understand the requirements from a flood standpoint, but just generally, that area I've seen get quite wet. So this ground floor is above wherever the high water table is, something below a flood event, and how does that get calculated? Or
So through you, Mayor, the required flood construction level on this subject property is 13.1 meters, so that would be the underside of the upper floor. In order to meet the 6.7 meter height restriction, the proponents would have to fill 4 feet, essentially to the bottom of the garage slab. What they're requesting is to only fill it 2 feet, so that you don't have to bring quite as much fill on, and it would still be raised up above existing grade, just less. And there's also scour protection and stuff like that required for foundations in that area. So the intention is to limit the amount of fill for the lower portion, but not to have it flat at existing grade.
and then that, if I read this right, this allows it to be closer to that property line as well. Otherwise, you'd have to have a retaining wall or a bunch of fill to get that height. Is that part of the rationale here?
Through you, Mayor, there isn't a request for a variance to the side yard setbacks, but that would likely assist because you would have to slope the fill up. But that is potentially, yes, that would allow it to be closer to that property line.
Thank you.
Is there car access back to this carriage house? And is that a garage on the bottom?
Yes, there is a garage on the bottom and there is a driveway. You can see kind of the pink outline here would be the driveway extension, and I believe this other elevation shows the garage door. So that would be the east elevation facing Government Road.
Any other questions, Council? Okay, so I'll go to the public to see if anyone would like to speak to the variances, which are to increase the height of the accessory dwelling unit from 6.7 meters to 7.3 meters, and the other variance is to allow more than one accessory building that exceeds 10 meters squared in gross floor area. So is there anyone in the public that wishes to speak to these variances tonight? Right. Council, any last questions? Council Becca.
Just so I'm clear, I don't think the removal of the building that's discussed being removed in the right of way is part of the actual variance permit, unless I missed it. Is that something that we should have in there?
Through you, Mayor, no, it is not. The applicants intend to demolish this building. They've submitted a demolition permit for this building. They were requesting it could be done prior to occupancy of the accessory dwelling unit, so it could still be used as storage for materials while they construct the accessory dwelling unit.
And so would we normally, though, when our goal is to have it destroyed, to have that sort of articulated explicitly as part of the resolution or the actual variance permit, would we normally do that, or do we just, that's normally not necessary?
Through you, Mayor. In this case, we felt it wasn't necessary because we do have a right-of-way there, so we have leverage in other ways, and the applicant clearly intends to follow through.
We've had lots of previous conversations about the necessity for developing accessory dwelling units and more rental spaces, and it crosses over into the conversation of short-term rentals. So I'm just curious if we can get an update from staff on when we expect that policy to come back, and if we need to actually add something to the covenant here about it not being allowed for short-term rentals. not predisposing as to what the result of that other
Yes.
conversation might be.
Through email, so we are planning to bring the draft bylaws for a committee meeting first. We have drafted bylaws on short-term rental. We're in internal consultation now with all of the other departments to make sure that it meets everybody's expectations. And then we're bringing that back either in December or January. We're trying to pick a date right now. We've had these conversations before about these individual carriage home applications, and we just feel that we need to get to that point on policy decisions before we start applying it to individual applications.
Raised hands. Councilor Herbert and then Councilor Pettengill. Were you done, Councilor?
I was.
All right. Oh, you didn't raise your hand? Councilor Pettengill.
Just for clarification though, since that question has come up, with our current bylaws, regardless of whether or not we articulate here explicitly, you cannot have a short-term rental there at this point.
That's correct, through Mayor. It's not a permitted use. We've talked about putting covenants as these come through. However, that would have resource implications if we had to do it for every single application. So we just want to make sure we're resourced before we go there.
Council?
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Moved by Councilor Stoner to approve the variances, seconded by Councilor French. Any other comments?
I'll speak to the motion.
Councilor French?
Yeah, this is an example of the type of housing infill that works well. This is an area with large lots of space, and even with this carriage house, this is still going to be a spacious lot. This is totally appropriate, and I fully support this.
Councilor Riggs?
Thank you. And I'm also supporting this for the same reasons, but also I think Councilor Pettengill's comment is worthy of some consideration, because there may be other examples, perhaps not for every lot, where this solution might be preferable to what might otherwise be mandated. So, because you are still getting the floodproofing, but without quite as much fill, and so I'll leave that to staff to consider.
Thank you. Councilor Herbert?
Thank you. I'll be supporting this. I was happy to see these are big lots in this area, and this infill is appropriate and still leaves lots of space, as my fellow councillors have noted. I was happy to see in the staff report consideration for not wanting to create the waste of tearing down something that was there to sort of fit to be able to move forward without these variances. So I was appreciative of sort of the holistic approach there, and yeah, happy to support it. And I'm sure we'll see more of these going forward.
Thank you. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have a section 57 notice on title 38180 Cleveland Avenue.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Chad William with Community Planning, the Building Department. The building that we're asking or looking for some council support on this evening is 38180 Cleveland Avenue. The challenge with this building first came to our attention last year. In August of 2018, we received a complaint of some unpermitted construction taking place. We visited the site with the building department with representatives from the fire department as well as representatives from Technical Safety BC. And there were a number of issues that were identified at that time, including an unpermitted living space on the upper floor of the building, as well as a number of issues with the restaurant or the commercial space on the lower floor. We did not have any permits for the work that was being performed. So at that time, it was warranted to put a stop work order and a do not occupy notice on the property to cease all activity that was going on there. We were successful. We've also had some more recent concerns with the building that was brought to our attention by Technical Safety BC, and they shut the power off on the building as a result, and we followed suit by shutting the water off so the pipes wouldn't freeze, etc. So we believe there's no one living in the building at present. And it is a standalone building that doesn't back onto another property. So the two motions that we are asking for tonight again is to instruct the corporate officer to place a bylaw notice on title under section 57 of the community charter, and as well as instruct the corporate officer in her discretion to seek injunctive relief if there's no compliance within 6 months. And we felt that 6 months is reasonable in this case because there is no one living in the building. There's no immediate threat to life, so we thought that would be a reasonable timeline. And that would be questions if anyone has them.
Any questions, Council? Don't see anything? Motion? Oh, sorry, you're right. The owner or the representative of the owner does have an opportunity to speak tonight, so is there a person present that wants to speak to this? Okay. No.
I'll move the recommendation.
Council French moves the staff recommendation, seconded by Council Race. Any comments? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Lynn.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we have a section 57 notice on title for unit 147-29002 Discovery Way. Hand it over to you, Mr. McCarthy.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Colin McCarthy. I'm a building inspector with Community Planning and Infrastructure. I'm here today to present a quick overview of the details of a complaint file I'm dealing with, make recommendations for a motion, and answer any questions you may have. As you can see, the property in question is Unit 147-39002 Discovery Way. A brief history, there may have been a more detailed history, I think, in some information you may have seen, but it initiated in June of this year. There was a complaint about a residential dwelling unit being constructed in a commercial space. At roughly that time, an inspection was performed. In this case as well, building code non-compliance issues were identified. Most notably, this was a residence constructed over top of an industrial space. It affected the effectiveness of the sprinkler system. We identified that there was a no occupancy notice posted. Some fines were issued for unpermitted construction at that time. We feel that this does fall into a fairly high risk category. At this time, and this is since June, there are no applications to resolve these issues. I also have two motions I'm requesting tonight. One is to instruct the corporate officer to place a bylaw and building code contravention notice on title. The second being a motion to instruct the corporate officer in their discretion to seek injunctive relief if a complete building permit application is not received by December 2nd, 2019. In this case, this motion seems to be a lot more harsh, for lack of a better word. This has gone on for multiple months. I've kept a chronological history of almost inaction for numerous months, despite our efforts to assist in any way that we could. I have consulted with Squamish Fire Rescue, who have also done recent inspections on this space as part of their annual inspection protocol, and this is what we determined was our best course of action to try and leverage some compliance. There are other units in this case that are affected. There's multiple units in this building. Also at this time, it's my understanding, as often happens once we put this process in motion, there's been a little bit of activity by the property owner. I have received notice in writing in from a locksmith that the locks have been changed, and the tenant who's involved here no longer has access to the space. As well as, I think you were delivered probably a letter today as some last minute information. There's an architect now who has taken over this file and seems to be providing the only communication, and is trying to assure us that there will be action forthcoming. However, I didn't want to change this motion at this time because there's still been no action other than letters. We're hopeful that it'll happen soon.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy. Council, are there any questions?
Just, it seems there's been a fair bit of back and forth since June, and a lot of it with the tenant, but some with the owner. Can you just speak to your confidence about where the owner is in their awareness and their have they been operating at a reasonable pace, or are we, I guess you clearly have concerns that the owner has been well aware and has not acted. It's not just a tenant issue.
Each one of these that we approach can happen quite differently. Often the non-compliance will deal with the tenant directly. Initially, that's who's in a space, and we'll see things happen quite quickly. The bylaw non-compliance are dealt with. In other cases, it's slower. Owners are often harder to reach. In this case, I'll say it wasn't easy. Things were slow. As I mentioned, since we started this process, since we made him aware that I was going to come to council, I've seen a flurry of activity, as is not uncommon in these cases. There was, in my opinion, there was no great effort to get this moving until very recently. I would say within the last 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay. So the owner is Mr. Hardy, or is there a representative for Mr. Hardy that's here tonight that wishes to speak to this motion in front of council? Don't see anyone. Any other further questions, council? Yes, Councilor Payne?
Just and maybe it's just a blip, but it seems that there's more of these than I'm used to seeing at council and performance event meetings. Have we changed something, or is there something different happening, or it's just
I've been doing this for 7 years. I've seen the community change. I've seen the fact that there are more situations like this happening, that the more that happen, the greater the risk is. We've taken a closer look with all of the authorities that look at this, including Squamish Fire Rescue, Planning Department, and others. I would say we are choosing to move a little bit quicker on some of this stuff. We don't want to leave it linger, as may have happened in the past. We want to see that this gets dealt with swiftly. It's not something that should fall off the side of the desk if at all possible. So that may be why, and our director might be able to speak to that a little bit as well.
Yeah, I would agree with Colin that we are taking a risk assessment approach now, where we're not just looking at how much activity there is on the property owner's behalf, but also what the risk is. And I think in the past we used to look more at how much willingness the owner appears to be displaying versus the actual risk that the unpermitted construction poses.
Council? Councilor Stoner?
I'll move this back.
I'll second it and I'll speak.
All right, moved by Councilor Stoner, seconded by Councilor French. Do you want to speak to your motion, Councilor Stoner?
Thank you for the details on the file. I do think it is important to move swiftly on this. I think that the tenant and the landlord have been given due process, and hopefully that with a December 2nd deadline, we'd see a little bit more activity than just emails. So thank you for bringing this forward.
Thank you, Councilor French, and then so your hand, Councilor Reeves.
So I said earlier that the government road issue that we dealt with is just the kind of housing that I think we need. This is just the kind of housing we do not need. And I applaud staff for the good work that's gone into this file. and fully support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Rice.
Thank you. I'll be supporting this motion as well, and I agree with Councillor French's comments. We don't need this, and the problem is it's a life safety issue. It's not just somebody trying to make some more money and make more money from their building. This notice is, in my view, a relatively soft landing, and it is not the first thing that staff does. It typically happens after a prolonged period of attempting to engage with the owner to remedy these things, and then finally, at some point, staff have to make the move. And I support staff in this, especially when you're dealing with tenancies and life safety issues like this. But it's a relatively low-cost thing for the owner of the property, relatively low cost to remove it. But it does focus everybody, I think, and lets them know that we are taking steps to resolve this, and it will be resolved. And hopefully we don't have to go to the second paragraph. That's the intent. So I will be supporting this.
Thank you. Any other comments? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much for your work. Council, we have a number of items for adoption tonight related to our loan authorizations. Staff are not going to make a presentation on these, so unless there's any questions, I'd like to move through them rapidly. The first one is the loan authorization for bylaw number 2687, 2019. That's for our TTP project, moved by Council Race, seconded by Council Pettengill. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The second one is the loan authorization bylaw number 2690, 2019 for the heavy-duty truck. Moved by Councilor Stoner, seconded by Councilor French. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Third is loan authorization bylaw number 2691, 2019 for the landfill vertical expansion. Moved by Councilor Anderson, seconded by Councilor Race. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And finally, the loan authorization bylaw number 2693, 2019 for our flood protection upgrades. Moved by Councilor French, seconded by Councilor Herford. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. A couple of staff reports tonight. First up is our multi-year automotive fleet procurement agreement award. Mr. Konashenko, welcome.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
Or evening. Or evening.
Pardon me?
Did you say good morning?
I said good morning, I said good evening. Still feels like morning in my world right now. Shake the rust off at least. Where am I, Gary? Oh, no? Beautiful. Okay. Before we get to the award of the two purchase agreements, I just wanted to give you a bit of an update on District of Squamish fleet practices from kind of a sustainability perspective. It's interesting when I started researching and looking at the presentation how far back we kind of go, and it's nice. I'm happy to be able to report that we've been working on this for a while. So the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that we started an e-bike program about 2 years ago. The district procured 3 e-bikes, and they've been quite well used, especially by the building department. I think they put on almost 1,000 kilometers in the first year that we had the bike, their bike at least. And we actually won an award from the Public Works Association of BC for innovation with this program. We also have a selection of light duty vehicles in our fleet, so mostly small vehicles for moving people, documents, and some small equipment and materials from place to place. And we've actually had hybrid vehicles in the fleet since 2008. So we have a couple of them coming up for replacement in the next 2 years, which I'll be talking to you about in a minute, including Toyota Prius, Ford Escape hybrids, and Ford C-Max hybrids. We also have a contingent of medium-duty vehicles. So these are Ford F-150s up to 1 ton or greater weight class, and they're used. They're kind of the workhorses of our fleet. They move people, materials, tools from job site to job site. We have dump boxes on some of the heavier duty vehicles for moving brush and other materials around. And also we equip them with snow and ice control implements for removing snow and ice from kind of the smaller collector roads in the winter. They're really useful where roads are narrow or there's a lot of parked cars or not a lot of room to turn around. And then finally we have currently 3 heavy-duty vehicles, 2 single-axle, 1 tandem axles trucks, and these are kind of the vehicles that maintain the main thoroughfares, government road, that kind of thing. When we have snow and ice events, and then the remainder of the year, they're moving aggregate, excavation spoils, and large piles of brush around the community. And also we use the tandem axle for trailering our excavation equipment, so the backhoe if needed, and the excavator as well. So we've been doing some research into what's available from a electric vehicle and alternative fuel standpoint, knowing that the District of Squamish has made a climate emergency declaration, and we want to do everything we can to adhere to that and support it. So light duty vehicles is where we see the most opportunity for converting our fleet or evolving our fleet. There's a host of electric and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles on the market, including Chevy Bolts, Ford Prius, Golf, or e-Golf. There's a Hyundai model. Toyota's even coming out with a hydrogen fuel vehicle as well. Yeah, and I'll talk to you a bit in a minute here. Because we have a few vehicles coming up for replacement in the next couple of years, we'll be looking to go electric, hopefully. As far as medium duty vehicles are concerned, there aren't currently no EV models from major manufacturers on the market. Some fleets, Millicap for example, is running a dual fuel gasoline and propane engine, and basically the business case there is because they're on the highway a lot and they have high mileage on their vehicles, it saves them in fuel cost. Doesn't really reduce the amount of greenhouse gas you're generating. So not necessarily the route we want to go. As far as heavy duty availability, there's no current year models from major manufacturers, but we do know that Cummins, Tesla, and Mack trucks, as well as others, are expected to release EV heavy trucks in the next few years. The applications for EV heavy trucks are more short haul in nature, so garbage trucks are a perfect example because they're not going fast and they're generally going short distances, and they're returning to base at the end of shift where they can be charged overnight kind of thing. So that's it may suit some of our applications, which is exciting to see coming on the market. There's also compressed natural gas heavy duty vehicles available, but they require a fairly significant infrastructure investment to go that route. We've also looked into EV charging requirements because it's very important to note that you can't drive an EV vehicle if you don't have the charger and the infrastructure to support that EV vehicle. So there's 3 levels of chargers available. Some, like the level 1 or 2 charger, run off your standard 120 outlet or a 220 volt connection like your dryer would at home. A level 3 charger like the one have across the street actually rectifies AC voltage to DC and then feeds it directly to the vehicle, which is why it allows it to charge so quickly. And they require a significant investment on the electrical side to make that happen. And then there's available alternative fuel technology. So this was kind of fun. Our fleet supervisor, Pete Tremblay, gave me this picture of a plaque from 2006 when we actually trialed biodiesel at the Public Works Yard. So we had a company for refuel deliver fuel, which we kept in the tank at the yard. And we were using it in our vehicles until it started to gel up in cold temperatures. So we were actually having to replace fuel filters monthly. And it created a host of other kind of maintenance related headaches. Recently, I think around 2010, the province actually mandated that commercial grade biodiesel be put in all diesel fuels. So when you're buying diesel fuel at the pump in the summer, you get 20% biodiesel, but in the winter they revert to 0% just because of the freezing issues. Propane has been widely experimented with by fleets in recent years. There's a hydrogen diesel fuel enhancement system on the market right now that we're investigating because it essentially allows you to offset the amount of diesel fuel you're burning in heavy trucks. And then obviously there's the compressed natural gas models available as well. There's some current rebates and incentives out there which we're hoping are going to help us with our conversion to electric vehicles. Up to $3,000 per vehicle from BC Hydro, also including $700 towards charging infrastructure. There's Government of Canada rebates up to $5,000. Clean BC has 50% off rebate on some charging infrastructure. And then for larger projects, NRCan has some grants available as well. And then kind of our ongoing continual research in the fleet industry. Our fleet supervisor goes to a fleet managers group in the Lower Mainland where he collaborates with other municipalities and suppliers on what vehicles are coming up, what new technology is coming online, is it working, is it not, you know, the usual continuous improvement stuff. We do demonstration trials from local suppliers. So one example from this past fall, we had a supplier bring a host of small handheld electrical equipment for our staff to try out. So weed eaters, mowers, chainsaws, leaf blowers, those types of things. And then we're also attending the BC Electric Fleet Symposium put on by the Fraser Basin Council in 2 weeks. Looking forward to that. What I wanted to talk to you a little bit about as well is the fact that in the proposed 2020 budget, we'll be looking at a 2-year program to electrify up to 6 of the district's existing fleet vehicles. Some of them are already hybrid, but we'll be looking to downsize and convert most of them to electric or plug-in hybrid vehicle. And additionally, there will be another budget ask to try to install some public-facing electric vehicle charging infrastructure in the district as well. So before I move to our motions, do you have any questions?
Councillor Henderson?
To my knowledge, there is some activity towards moving towards compressed natural gas in Worcester. I'm not sure to what extent this extends to beyond their bus fleet. I wonder if there's opportunity for collaboration. I might just pass on that over the years, various people have come to look at our wood waste issue and we have in the valley and have suggested, you know, you could be producing compressed natural gas and sell it to Worcester. So my general question is there some things going on in the region that we could collaborate with, namely Worcester, regarding compressed natural gas?
It's a very good question, Councillor Anderson, through the Mayor. We haven't investigated what it would take to collaborate with them currently, but we can certainly take that on and reach out.
Thank you.
Councillor Stoner, then Councillor Pettengill, and Councillor.
Thank you for the presentation and the history and the background. I think you answered 95% of my questions, so well done. My question is still around the procurement award. Ties us for 5 years, but does it tie us to a certain percentage of our fleet getting purchased directly through them? I ask because it says that they'll be able to provide 94% of the district's current vehicle procurement needs, but not electric vehicles, although Ford does have electric vehicles. So I'm just curious as to what percentage of our future procurement are we then required to purchase through the city?
So the nice thing about the agreement that we're proposing, Council's proposing, is that it's very flexible. Ford can provide up to 94% of our existing fleet, but that does not tie us to necessarily awarding those vehicles to Ford. For electric vehicles, for heavy duty trucks, for our excavation equipment, we routinely go to market. The advantage of having a 5-year agreement in place is that when and where it makes sense, we don't have to go back to market to procure those vehicles. If we're just replacing a medium duty truck with another medium duty truck, we can just sign a PO and go out and buy that vehicle. It saves us a lot of administration and potentially council as well.
Bangor?
So that's interesting. So we could approve this and move forward, but not buy a single vehicle from Ford in the next 5 years, theoretically? And buy a bunch of Teslas or something?
Through the mayor. that might be a stretch, and our procurement manager would have a bit more detail on that for me. I can't give you a concrete answer to that question. What it means is we'll do most of our vehicle replacements with Ford, but where it makes sense, if there's a vehicle that Andy's right here.
Yeah.
So if you'd
wanna
like
come
to
forward
join
and
me
answer
and
that
help me with this question, I'd appreciate it.
Just introduce yourself first.
Anthony Jeffrey, Manager of Procurement. So to answer your theoretical question, yes, it is a possibility. It's basically a non-binding agreement, so as Ben was saying, where and when it makes sense, we can go to Ford. Whenever we want to go to market and we think it's in our best interest too, we have that flexibility in the agreement.
Yes, follow-up?
So that's great. And actually, I wanted to mention too, I appreciate the work that you've been doing on moving us to EVs and some better options. I just, one of the things that I would like to see us do is not just procure lower emissions vehicles, but drive the market so that we can procure them more easily. And so I'm wondering, have we given any consideration, or would we, to rather than make our vehicles last a little bit longer, spend a little bit more on repairs, and sort of try and signal to the market, we'll buy when you have an EV, or is that sort of an orders of magnitude much more expensive to do that, say, for 3 years?
Through the mayor, fleet replacement best practice is something that a lot of municipalities struggle with. What is the right amount to keep a vehicle? There are cases where we have done that with certain vehicles. We know they're in good condition, so we extend them. There's other vehicles we have where we wish we could replace them sooner because they're so beat up and well used. The main reason we have a major replacement cycle is because there is a point in a vehicle's age where it becomes exponentially expensive to maintain it. And it's not only the expense, it's the time. So it ties up a lot more of our mechanics' time and effort with one vehicle instead of servicing the other ones on a regular schedule and getting them back out the door. And it also reduces the business case and the amount of money we get on trade-in. So I guess, in a roundabout way of answering your question, that's bit us a few times in the past where we have a vehicle and we're trying to get another year or two out of it, and then the transmission goes and you have to spend $500, $600, $7,000, not hundreds of thousands spent, right before you send the vehicle to auction.
One more.
On the public EV, I'm just curious, and maybe it's too much of a tangent from this, but can you speak to why we're thinking about investing district money as opposed to...
No, that's definitely off topic.
Oh.
You're going to say that for a different meeting.
Okay.
Sorry. Not for our fleet folks to talk about tonight, but we'll bring it back. That's a good question. Over to you, Councilor Herbert.
Thank you. Earlier in the presentation, you mentioned the compressed natural gas infrastructure not being available. And can you speak a little bit to what would be required and what potential business case there is for that going forward, and the sort of the, I believe it's medium and heavy duty vehicles are the best application for that, from my rough understanding?
Through the mayor, I personally don't have a whole lot of experience with or knowledge of compressed natural gas infrastructure. We can certainly look into it. I'd be personally, from a personal standpoint, I'd be interested to know if there is a difference in greenhouse gases produced by CNG versus conventional fuels. But it's something we can take away and look at for sure.
And I acknowledge that's slightly off topic for this procurement piece, but I'm curious about what our options are there and what impact they could have. So, but thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race.
Thank you. So I'm delicately treading in the subject of charging stations. But without going into the public one, I mean, that talks about public. I take it if we do start to move into electric vehicles, there'll be some requirement to install these at municipal stations somewhere, Works Yard, for example. Is that part of the budget ask for this coming year?
Councillor Race, through the mayor, yes. So the budget asks that we're bringing forward, it's a 2-year program to replace 6 vehicles, and will include chargers at the Works Yard and I believe municipal hall / the library. And there'll be 4 district vehicles only.
Thank you. That was
Okay.
That was suitably on topic. Thank you. I couldn't see that Councillor Pagano was going in that direction.
Thanks for the great information. I was impressed with the contents of the report, and then you've taken it a step beyond and added a lot more information that wasn't in our report. So thank you for all of that. And I'm just thinking of there is a choice that could be made to skip compressed natural gas altogether and hold out for more advancements with electric technology. So I'm just wondering if any thought has been given to keep the CNG and alternative fuels idea on low burn and focus more on electrical infrastructure, with the thinking that that technology is moving quickly.
Through the mayor, electric technology is our basically our priority as far as if when it's available, replacing vehicles. CNG, propane, hydrogen are other forms of fuels that I thought were relevant for this discussion with council.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Councillor Stillman moves the staff recommendation, seconded by Councillor Race. Do you want to speak to it?
Thanks again to staff for the detailed report that came forward. I think that this puts us in a fiscally prudent position for those tougher to transition vehicles, but gives us the flexibility that we need to move towards electrification as we need to with regards to the climate emergency. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor French.
So moving to an electric fleet, I think, just makes sense for where we are. Hydroelectric is in abundance around us, and we should be leading the world in switching over to electric technology, not just in our fleet, but in things like leaf blowers and other smaller engines, as you mentioned earlier in the report. So I fully support the motion.
Yeah, I was a bit nervous when I saw the 5-year commitment, given how fast I think we need to move, but hearing that we have options and can buy EVs from another manufacturer sooner if we need to, that gives me comfort to support this. I do think we should maybe take a bit of a look at our fleet renewal plan and see if we can extend the life out of existing vehicles a bit longer and just try and goose the market to move a bit faster. But happy to support this.
Thank you. Any comments on this side of the table? Councillor Race.
Yeah, thank you. For the reasons given, I'm also supporting this, and thank you for the, it was an interesting, for me, an interesting presentation. and I certainly support the direction staff is taking in this. I appreciate there's going to be struggles when we have certain demands on our equipment, and the technology might not quite be there, but hopefully the technology will catch up to our needs. Thank you.
I'm definitely supporting this motion. I think what all of us in municipal government are going to struggle with is how quickly we can drive the industry in. So I know that the fleet managers group meets monthly, so that's everybody in the Lower Mainland. Procurement does the same thing. I think combined, our power to drive market change is very strong. So I hope those conversations are happening at those joint meetings. And also note that the SLRD in their strategic plan would like to look at joint procurement efforts through the Squamish Lillooet Regional District as well, to sort of leverage some of those points that Councillor Anderson was making earlier, where there's opportunities to collaborate, making that easy for municipalities and regional district to do that. So this is a great start. Thank you very much for your work on this. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next up is the heavy duty lift truck RFQ award. I believe that's yours as well, Mr. Commissioner.
It is. So I don't have a presentation for the lift truck. Just to give you a summary, in 2018, our department put together a business case based on our near daily run with biosolids from the wastewater treatment plant to the RMOW compost facility in Callahan. The trucking for that is all done through contracted services. And we identified that need or a business case where buying a truck and providing an operator will actually provide roughly a 6-year payback on the purchase of the truck. But the truck will also allow us to, back up one step. The run takes approximately 3 hours, leaving us with a heavy duty truck that can be put to work for the rest of the day. And another need that was identified with all the growth in the district and the additional roads and steep hills that are being built is the need for additional snow and ice control in the wintertime, which this truck would also provide for us. So essentially the recommendation or the resolution rather that I'd like to put to council is that the District of Squamish Council approve the award of the request for quotes for supply of a heavy duty lift truck to Harbour International Trucks, and that Mayor Corporate Officer sign and direct staff to deliver a purchase order to begin vehicle build.
Any questions, Councillor Rice?
No.
You have a question, Councillor
I do.
Hold on that thought. Councillor
You mentioned a 6-year payback. Does that include an assumption about the value at those 6 years, and so like a resale and how that would factor into things, or is that just after 6 years we've broken even?
The truck is the business case includes what we currently spend on biosolids hauling, some material savings on brine and rock salt, efficiency savings in overtime, staff overtime during snow and ice event cleanup, and overtime savings during brine deployment. But then it also, in the cost side, takes into account additional operator time for running biosolids and vehicle ownership and maintenance costs. So to answer your question, yes, it basically is takes into account all costs of owning and operating an additional truck in the fleet.
So I guess where I'm going with this is just, and it won't stop me from supporting this, but wondering, as we're sort of projecting out the cost and the lifetime cost of these, if electrics come on aggressively and the value of combustion vehicles just falls out all of a sudden, are we thinking about that in our sort of longer term financial plan?
Through the mayor, I had never thought about the value of internal combustion vehicles dropping in value that quickly. That's an interesting point to raise, for sure.
Ms. Ruxin?
That will probably impact our fleet reserve bylaw more than it will these business cases. Of course, that's where the disposition costs option are factored into that. So that's something, and we're working on, that's currently a project that we're working on right now.
It's going to be a really interesting time. Okay, back to you, Councillor Riggs.
I was going to move the staff recommendation. I'll speak with you.
Seconded by Councillor Craigville.
I almost remember the budget discussion around this, which is a little frightening to me, but support that. I remember the business case discussion dealing with materials going back and forth through the waste treatment center. So, but happy to support this. I think this. I'm sure, you know, in this transition we've been talking about in this issue and one just previous. I'm sure not everything will time out perfectly. That would be a minor miracle. You know, we might find everything is electric after 6 years, but we still want to hold on to this truck for 3 or 4 more years or something because it just makes financial sense. But those are decisions that we can make in the future as they come up, I think, and I'm supporting this tonight.
Thank you. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next up is the lease for the Buckley Avenue Affordable Rental Housing Project. When do we have to give it a new name, Mr. Buckley? When do we even name it?
It's not interesting.
Does Steve's guy get to name it?
Yes, technically it's not our project anymore to name, but I say I will come to that. Gary Buxton, General Manager here at one of the General Managers here at the District, Will Plum, our Real Estate Manager. Again, I will give you it's been 11 months since Council has last seen anything in detail on this project, so a bit of a primer and a reminder. It's really a central element of the housing affordability and diversity part of Council's strategic plan. If we want to reach that 125 affordable purpose-built units, this is 2/3 to 3/4 of that number. So it's an integral part of our strategic plan. The objective is that tonight we're seeking that Mayor and Council approve the lease for the Buckley project at 38648 Buckley Avenue. In terms of background, the rezoning was done in 2017 when it was rezoned to a comprehensive district, CD 89. It allows in that district and in the lease the use of affordable housing and a youth hub, which is a clinical and recreational centre for youth services of various types. It's a partnership, the project is a partnership between Sea to Sky Community Services, the district and BC Housing. The skateboard park, which you can see the sort of mid part of that, the lack of trees, that sort of blue-green area, the skate park will remain. And in the northwest corner, at the intersection of that unnamed road in Buckley, is where the public park, that is a district project, will be constructed next year. A site map, you're getting a bit of a preview of the development permit that's coming to Council, I think, in 2 weeks' time, so I'm spoiling some of the lanes and Jonas's thunder in a couple of weeks. Site plan, the apartment building within the yellow lease area, parking to the south, and you can see the future park, the green area. The riparian areas are essentially they are untouched throughout the project. 4-story apartment building, 76 affordable rental units. The youth hub, as I noted, it's meeting step 3 with respect to energy efficiency. That's the current target. And there are 3 sort of tranches or categories of units. The deep subsidy, so you're under $400 a month for those units. You're in the $800 to $900 range for the rent geared to income units, and the market, the CMHC modest market units, are in the sort of $1,000 to $1,100 dollars per month. Project history goes back to September, December of 2018 when we made the initial grant application under the CHF or Community Housing Fund, which at that point we had townhouses and an apartment on the project, and it was all low and moderate income. There was nothing in terms of deep subsidy or rent geared to income. That grant was approved in December, submitted in conjunction with Cedar Sky Community Services. And then we essentially had to resubmit the program again with Cedar Sky back under the community partnership, the CPI Community Partnership Initiative. So this is where the rental units started to come in at much lower income rates. So it was 30% of the moderate income units, half of them are the rent geared to income, and 20% of the deep subsidy units. So in that transfer between September, December, May to September, working with BC Housing, we went from essentially, which was a non-subsidised modest market project, to one that offered far lower rents to the potential tenants. November of last year, about a year ago, we did put out a request for expression of interest to operate the project. One submission, Cedar Sky Community Services. And at that point in December of last year, Council directed staff to execute the lease. So we are here to essentially close the loop on that motion from Council. January of 2019, BC Housing have approved the CPI grant application. They directed mortgage and financing to Cedar Sky Community Services as part of that decision. Of course, we have some difficulty in holding a 25-year mortgage without getting public assent or plebiscite. So the project management is thereby transferred from district to Cedar Sky once that decision is made. So we're in a support role with Cedar Sky. It is their project in terms of the construction. We simply are leasing them the land. The building will belong to Cedar Sky. We're in detailed design, and the development permit and the building permit is almost ready for submission. So we're quite a way. Cedar Sky have moved very quickly and quite a way through the project. Those are the latest building elevations, north, south, east, and west. So it's 4-story apartment with, on the ground floor is parking and the youth hub. And just some images of the project that the architect has developed. The key terms of the lease, 60 years with a 60-year extension as an option, $1 a year. As noted in the drawings, we're leasing a part of the site. We keep the skate park, the riparian areas and public park. The only uses allowed are affordable housing and the youth hub. It needs district approval for market housing. The tenant's responsible for all building maintenance and repairs, and will look after the park and the skateboard. So, with that, if council has any questions.
Oh, I still want that to be real.
I'm not that capable to do the animation, so that's as good as it's going to get.
All right.
So if council has any questions.
So, just in the conference I've been to in the last month, thinking about our GHG targets, 45% by 2030 and 100% reduction by 2050, someone, if this isn't a zero emissions building from the get-go, theoretically at some point someone's going to have to retrofit it, well before the 60-year lease is up. So who would be responsible for that, the financial aspect of such a retrofit?
The building will belong to Cedar Sky Community Services.
Now, given where we are in the process, I had some conversations. It sounds like the Ministry of Energy, Mines, Petroleum and Resources are interested in funding, helping business buildings and projects like this. Sometimes you can sort of make they don't have a specific grant, but you can ask them, and they're willing to fund some of these things sometimes. are we in a position where we could make that request and try and make this happen before construction starts, or is this really, we are completely hands off and there's nothing we can do at this point to?
There's never nothing that we can do, but the project's being funded by BC Housing. And the current level of building sustainability is what they've said we need to achieve, and they don't typically fund building levels above that. The more critical issue is we would have to go back to square one with the building design. That would be about 6 months worth of work. We would need to get both Sea to Sky and BC Housing to approve that level of delay and redesign, which would mean we would probably have to come with funding to that discussion. Because the district doesn't control this project, it really is a Sea to Sky BC Housing project. So if we have an alternate, we need to bring that solution to the table.
Yeah, I'm really hesitant to delay things at the same time. I wonder if it's worth at least having a conversation about, you know, making sure Sea to Sky Community Services is aware of our, you know, our targets and how serious those are, and at some point, you know, some fairly expensive retrofits will probably be required, assuming we don't change our policies. And so, do we need to try and make these adjustments work? And maybe there are some things we can do or should at least consider, or are they prepared to just push on ahead and deal with it down the road?
I won't speak for Sea to Sky Community Services, but we do have Jesse Abraham here. I don't know if Jesse, you would want to speak to them. You would need to come to them. I don't want to put you on the spot.
I can, yeah, that's no problem. So good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jessie Abraham, and I'm the Director of Housing for Sea to Sky Community Services. So I guess in response to that question, we are aware of targets. We've been working quite closely with BC Housing in regards to energy efficiency. And so during the design process, it is their expectation that this is well above a step 1 energy step code building. They required step 3, and so that's what we've been working towards. So right now, the application we're submitting is for a step 3 building. So I don't know if that answers your question at all.
Well, I guess the concern is that a step 3 or even a step 5 won't hit the targets. It really ultimately needs to be a zero emissions building to hit the 2050 target. And so I'm just sort of concerned, you know, part of the discussion, just for context, was talking to other municipalities that are finding a 3 to 5% incremental cost to go to a step 5 zero emissions building, because they're claiming that's everywhere from Ontario to really cold winters to places on the island and so on. So, and part of their thinking is that it's a bit of an upfront cost, but the longer term operating, especially for the tenants, is therefore lower. And then I heard that the ministry, the one ministry is willing to sometimes fund some of these things. It just got me thinking, should we try and make this happen somehow now, or do we just press on ahead, I guess, and sort of assume we'll deal with this in 10 years or 15 years when we do need to get to a zero emissions building?
I think it's going to be quite difficult at this point in the process to stop and go back 6 months. We would need to persuade BC Housing to essentially halt the program, hold that funding, and then hopefully we can come back in 6 months with, well, we would need to find the design funds for the architects and the consultants to undo and redo quite a bit of work, and come back with the capital funding for that additional 3 to 5%, which, what do we have, 19 million? Oh, don't make me do the math. 10%, it's another million. So we would need, we the district or through the grant funding would need to come up with that difference, because the indication we've had from BC Housing is this is the standard that we fund. So we would need to come up with both the design funding, the additional capital funding, and get the approval of both BC Housing and Sea to Sky to essentially put the project on hold for, it's taken us 6 months to get from preliminary design to this point. So we're going back 6 months and needing to get funding and approval from our partner and BC Housing.
I'm going to move on. Are there questions? Councilor River?
I'll take, I think it's site details for 200.
Not the day you tell me.
Would be the, on this, adjacent to this site is the current, I think it's 1135 Carson Place, should be the current rec.
Yes.
Yeah, and just earlier we heard about some considerations about demolition costs and impacts, and I was just wondering, as the youth hub opens in this new building comes online, if anything here contemplates sort of dealing with that other building, or if that's just a separate issue, because it is kind of off the property, looks like it infringes a little bit, but has that been contemplated in this whole equation?
I believe that's slated for demolition in our real estate program once the youth hub is open.
Oh, once the youth hub is open.
Yeah. So yes, it is on our knockdown list. So.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? The lease renewal for another 60 years, it's a long time, 120 years for a piece of land. Is that standard? Could it be 60-20? I mean, the life of the building will only be so long. Given Council Pettingill's concerns, do we keep an inefficient building going for longer than 60 years?
Through Mayor, I mean, there is no real standard. I mean, this is what the BC Housing's approached us with. We have had other agreements, long-term agreements with like the co-op housing, the Eagle Grove housing. We've done that, a long-term agreement there. I can't remember off the top of my head how long that agreement is, but it's definitely 60 years, potentially longer than that. So it just comes down to, in this case, the applicant has made this request, and given the nature of the land and it's land to be used for community purposes, we felt that it was appropriate to bring it forward.
Okay. And following up on Councilor Pettingill's questions, I mean, we've heard through members of our climate leadership team that a step 1 home that just has electricity has 1/10 the greenhouse gas footprint as a step 5 home that uses fossil fuel, so natural gas. So it's really fundamentally about how we heat and cool this building. And so, what are we using?
Through the chair panel, it's electrically heated. There's no natural gas at all. We will get a final answer on that.
I think that will have the bigger impact in the short term in terms of its footprint, because step 3 is quite. I wouldn't imagine the design would change so much between step 3 and 4. It's generally building envelope work rather than a redesign, isn't it?
It's all the mechanical work that needs to get redone.
Councilor Anderson?
Yes, you mentioned that the old police station, the present use center, will be demolished. There is a service pipe that accompanies the culvert between the high school and that youth center. I wonder whether that servicing would be also utilized by the new building. And the reason why I ask is that in approximately the year 2009, there was it was evaluated whether to replace that culvert with a bridge for fish habitat enhancement reasons. And so there may be that consideration may come forward again if the servicing pipes are not required for the Buckley thing and the Buckley project, and the were just oriented to the youth center, which will be demolished. I guess it's a technical question regarding service infrastructure, but I may also just add that that riparian area has always needed management, and we have volunteer teams going in there twice a year over the last 10 years to my involvement to address those sloughs. And the skate park has been a source of issues. A few years back it has improved, but You've
What does this have to
mentioned.
do with the lease?
Pardon me?
What does this have to do with the lease? Your
It does,
question
it
about
does.
the lease?
It's peripheral, but I just asked regarding these infrastructure issues, but we can address it otherwise.
Thank you. Any other questions on the lease? I am concerned about the 120 years. Like, 100 years from now, we could be in a very different time and place, especially downtown. Like,
In 60 years, the building will be in need of some serious
absolutely.
repairs. So at that point in time, the owner's going to have to make some decisions about, and at that point in time, there'll probably be standards and requirements way in excess of what we require now. So this essentially gives them access to the land. The building we know will need serious work in 60 years' time.
So I'm just trying to understand the requirement for BC Housing to have a 60-60 lease. How do they justify that?
The initial 60 is around
That's the life of the building, I get that.
for mortgaging purposes and life of the building.
Yeah.
The second half of that, I mean, to be honest, this lease is modelled almost verbatim on the under one roof lease.
And then I missed 120 years in that lease.
That may have been 40 and 40, I don't recollect, but there certainly is a sense for the initial term needs to handle the life of the building and not necessarily mortgaging. I mean, I guess we can take it back to, we would need to consult BC Housing and Commission because they were very particular about some of the provisions that went into this lease because of the mortgaging concerns. So we would need to go back and have them at least understand that it's 60 plus something else. Or
It's just nonsensical to think that this building is going to last 120 years. So I do kind of want to push back on that, Councillor Reyes.
Yeah, thank you. But what we're leasing is the land. And so if the building becomes, as long as we're the owner and it's zoned in the way it's zoned, and the way the lease is set up, can only be used for this rental housing that's been described there. If the building fell into disrepair, it would either have to be upgraded to continue on, abandoned at that point, surrender the lease, not likely, or more likely is torn down and replaced with something the same because the use that's permitted doesn't change for that 120 years as long as the district wants it to be that use. So the more likely alternative, I think, is that 60 years from now the thing is demolished and rebuilt, and it could be rebuilt as another supported rental housing building, and it would take the district consent to change that.
that's probably a likely scenario. Or the building would be substantially renovated in 60 years' time.
Almost the same thing.
At which point we would be having to deal with the energy standards and the sustainability standards at that time. But I say, if it's council's wish, we can certainly go back and ask.
See, Mayor, I mean, there's no doubt with this agreement that we're making a commitment to utilize this land for these purposes for a long time. I think the bigger question might be whether we would have a use of it for our own purposes municipally in 60 years. We can't predict that or project that at this point in time. We haven't identified any needs yet through the master plan for that land for the foreseeable future, which is why we're here with this agreement. So I think that's probably the bigger question is just whether we're willing to commit the land to that use for that period of time. If that's the appropriate time frame.
There you go.
Is there anything in here that would constrain us if we get some new powers to deal with some of the climate emergency and we mandate all buildings must be zero emissions by 2045 or whatever it is? Is there anything in here that would sort of protect this from that?
So Through Mayor, in the lease, there's likely a clause, and I'll try and dig it up, but typically leases involve a clause that says you need to administer or live by all the regulations and bylaws. So if it's enacted through a bylaw through the district, that there's something has to be done, then they would have to follow that as part of that process.
I think that Council Pettingill's concern, our concern is that this is either going to cost us for Sea to Sky Community Services now, or it's going to cost them in the not too distant future, but it is going to cost them. And that's why we're asking if there's any flexibility in the short term to increase the efficiency or ensure that there's not fossil fuel restriction going into the building. So I think it's out of abundance of concern and caution that we're not putting undue hardship on a building that's supposed to be affordable. So I don't know whether Sea to Sky wants to deal with that tonight or wants to take that under advisement, or whether council wants to make that an issue on the lease agreement or make it an issue at DP. Is that the other place to put this?
But the DP will be administering the guidelines that we have in place which right now, which are step 3.
Thank you. I understand the step 3 is where there's the guidelines that are in place, but the I think what Mary Elliott was getting at, or what I took from that, was more the heating and the hot water, that natural gas element, and if we can enshrine that. If we were to want to enshrine that, where do we do it? And this feels like the place to do that, where we may not have that opportunity at DP. Is that
it would be
right?
difficult, through the chair, it would be difficult to do that at DP because that's not currently our policy. So we would be essentially inventing policy through a DP approval, which is tricky. I mean, my concern is that unfortunately we are so far down the road on the design on this. To go back now is a substantial delay. I appreciate council's concern in the climate emergency, but this project is 9 months in the making, if not longer, and it will be tricky for us to go back.
And we may not need to go back because the design we couldn't. It seemed like most of the heat was done electrical, but there's still a maybe on the rest. So if it's, we may not need to regulate that. That may already be the way that it is.
I'm just reluctant at this point to say categorically that there's no natural gas to the building. It's been a while since I looked at the mechanical drawings, but I mean, I guess
I was just going to add that the housing units for sure are electric baseboard, heating and electric cooling. I just have to check the youth hub. I can't remember offhand what we decided for mechanical.
In slab heating that's
Yeah.
the heat room, if that's. Yeah, we would need to go back. I can certainly confirm relatively quickly tomorrow what the nature of the heating sources are, whether there's any fossil fuels in typically.
So there seem to be a lot of questions around this, but are those things captured in a lease or are they captured somewhere else?
Then these issues are certainly not addressed in the lease, and these issues are not typically addressed in a lease.
They're not typically addressed in a lease. Any other questions?
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Seconded by Councilor Chris.
Thank you. And I note the comments of some of my councillors, and having lived with this now for the last 3 years or so, and recognizing the amount of work that's gone into this to get this going for much needed housing market. I am reluctant to start making changes like that at this point. I'm concerned. First of all, I don't have a problem with the 60 and 60 year term. And because the use for that, if it lasts 120 years, will be for presumably always needed housing. The state of the building will be up to the building operators and all the other rules we live by. And so it will either be maintained or it will have to be fixed and renovated or demolished and rebuilt. Generally speaking, I don't have difficulty with committing that little piece of the district for that particular use for up to 120 years. The other issue about the heating is, in my experience, it would be an unusual term in a lease to see that in there. And we can say we want to see it now in this one, but the difficulty I have with that is the reason this is set up this way is for financing purposes. And I would be hesitant to make that a term of the lease because things like that can sometimes upset financing. And I don't want to do that either at this late stage of the lease. The lease will be mortgaged, probably. That's anticipates a mortgage. And financing rules and financing criteria for some people financing sometimes would stop you from putting something like that in the lease. So I am reluctant to do that. So notwithstanding the concerns, I would prefer to see this go ahead now, and that's why I made this motion.
Thank you. Mr. French?
I too support the staff recommendation. This is housing that we desperately need now, and there's a whole building process still to go through. We need this housing, and while I understand the concerns of council, I think that we need to learn from this experience and make sure that when we are involved in projects like this in the future, we're dealing with issues like this earlier in this process. Thanks.
Abigail?
Yeah, so I will be supporting this as I meant to say. If I didn't say it, my goal is not to delay this. It's just, although climate change is the underlying factor, become much more aware of the costs of doing things now versus later, and very concerned when this is affordable housing that, even if there's a bit of extra work to do now and even a couple steps back, my sense is that that might still be the cheapest path forward in the long term, and we may as a municipality have some options we could bring to the table possibly. So I just wanted to have a discussion and explore that, and even with the presuming an approval of this lease as is, that may be worth some consideration to see if we can pursue some of those things.
Councilor Anderson?
I'll be supporting this motion. When we speak of green building, we need to address more than just heating system. I think in the case of this building and for its purposes, a bigger issue may turn out to be the resiliency of the building. And that will factor in its design and construction. And we'll learn about that as we go as well. We'll be supporting the present motion.
Councilor Hurd?
Thank you. I'll be supporting the motion, and I'm looking forward to having this project up and running. We need housing urgently in our community, and I hope the concerns of the council are at least taken into consideration as we go forward. I'm happy to hear the majority of the building is heated with electric, and that'll help its GHGs, and I'm looking forward to this building helping with our housing crisis. So I look forward to seeing it get underway. Thank you.
Councilor Stoner?
Happy to support the staff recommendation and appreciate my colleagues' comments and questions about the longevity of the project. I think one of the core things as we continue to think about the climate emergency and how that changes is the potential impacts that it has on our more vulnerable populations, and that is exactly what we're trying to move this project forward for. I have no issues with signing a 120-year lease for that land to go towards affordable housing in that long-term perpetuity. But I think the questions at least raise it in everybody's minds, the importance of kind of thinking through how we start to build these projects now and into the future. So happy to support this. Thankful for the conversation that came out this evening and for the ongoing work on this really important project for our community.
All the question, all those in favor, opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next up is our consent agenda. Anything that anybody needs to pull from the consent agenda?
I will pull the committee of the whole November 12th minutes. There's one more. Sorry, you did amend them, but there was one piece that I pulled off.
Okay.
Minor amendment.
So we'll place that under number 13. Anything else need to be pulled? Okay. Motion to approve the, I'll move the consent agenda, seconded by Council French. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Action requested. We had a letter from B. Gibbons about protection of groundwater. That correspondence be directed to the Director of Community Planning to review as part of the zoning bylaw review. Is that sufficient action? Is people okay with that? You can move that motion. Moved by Councilor Hooker, second by Councilor Stoner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so this next one is actually for council consideration. We have a letter of support request from Dave Rancier with Target Homes to the CMHC. I believe in our package he provided an example. This is to make 10% of the units. Is that right? Different letter. As far as the shovel-ready project, it must be rented at 10% below market rental rates.
The whole unit.
To construct a 27-unit apartment building as rental housing offered at rates 10% below market rental rates. Although generally we say 20%. Our goal in terms of what we're trying to build in our strategic plan has been 80% of market. So this would not qualify in our strategic plan. It wouldn't qualify to that number because they're only 10% below market, so there's any planning staff that can speak to it.
What page?
166.
Mr. Buxton, can you speak to the request from Target Homes on their Railtown project? Generally, we ask proponents to provide affordable rental at 80% of market rates. And their letter of support to CMHC is for 10% below market rates, so they'd be at that 90% level. Is there anything else in their, like, that's part of their funding from CMHC, but where are they really trying to come in terms of market rent? At the 80% level or just at 90%?
I can't offhand recollect. That building is a blend of market rental and sub-market rental, but I don't know if we've actually inked the housing agreement on it yet that specifies the rents that they need to, or the rates that they need to come in at.
I'm just concerned that council's not working with all the information it needs. Our strategic plan goal is to build 125 affordable rentals at 80% of market. So these ones wouldn't apply to that goal if they're at 10% off of market.
Again, I would need to go back and look at the DP approval and the housing agreement if it's been executed.
I think we did the housing agreement, but...
And I can't recall, would that not be enshrined in the zoning decision? Or the housing agreement as part of that?
there is direction contained in the MUD zoning, but we really need to look at the housing agreement. That's where it would be inked and signed, sealed and delivered.
Because I had similar questions. And I don't recall, frankly, whether some were at market and some below market. And the letter isn't clear about whether the entire building has to be 10% below market or just part of it. And so I think we do need some clarification. The other issue, of course, is that this is a private for-profit business. And so the type of letter of support we've given in the past, I recall, for things like this, is a general statement about the need for affordable housing in the district without specifically identifying that particular project. So that aspect of it I don't have a problem with along those lines, but I think, to the mayor's point, I think it would be nice to know whether or not, some breakdown on what this actually means. Is it just average of the whole rental, 10% below market, is it specific units? And how does it align with our zoning? Or is it the zoning that would actually dictate what we ultimately can rent for, which may work for us?
I think we need to get council the housing agreement if it has been inked yet, and all development approval to answer that question.
So maybe I'll make a motion to refer this back to staff and have it returned at the next regular business meeting.
Yep.
Seconded by Councillor Race. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The third one, staff, we actually have a blue sheet where this guest actually responded to Tracy Windsor. So that has been done. Do we still need to pass a motion, Ms. Arthur?
It's for information now. It's become for
We
information.
receive for information then. So we'll move receipt. Moved by Councillor Hurford, second by Councillor Stoner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So approval of minutes, we'll go to Councillor Stoner. You would pull the minutes from November 12th.
Yeah, Committee of the Whole, November 12th. Let me just find them. I believe it's item 3 sub 4, the conference update. I did submit a minor amendment, but I just wanted to add a clarification that Councillor Pettengill attended both conferences while I only attended the Community Leadership Institute. Clarification.
Did you get that, Sean?
Thank you.
You've got two Councillor Pettingills there. The second one is Councillor Stoner. So move those minutes with the amendment. Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Pettingill. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We have recommendations, both from all three from November 12th. First one in regards to the Planaic Dyke. That we use option 1, the sheet pile at high watermark as described in the report from community planning dated November 12th. Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor French. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Who's opposed? Sorry. Councillor Race opposes. And Councillor Pettingill opposes. Next up is university sub-area. There's two sub-area planning. There's a number of bullet points there. So that the council provided feedback and to incorporate this feedback into the zoning bylaw update. Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Reese. Any comments on those? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And finally, that the District of Squamish direct staff to update the June 2018 agreement between Modo and the district to include a $500 monthly flat fee to be reviewed annually. Moved by Councilor Hurford, second by Councilor French. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, we have minutes to receive from the advisory design panel for October 31st. Moved by Councilor Anderson. No, you're not moving it?
No, I'd like to make a comment as well.
Do you want to make your comment?
Yes, please. Thank you. There is under the roundtable discussion in the advisory design panel minutes, there is a suggestion from the chair, the issue of prioritizing important points of the minutes to bring forward to council and to make it easier to read and more clear. Verbatim minutes are lengthy and it may be better to trim down the comments after reviewing them. My own view is that I enjoy reading the advisory design panel minutes, and I have to respect the volunteer efforts that go into these meetings on the part of the individuals there. And I find that they're valuable discussions. And I would just like to pass on from Councillor Anderson, they're my favorite reading after Henrik Gibson. And I would not recommend that that there's too much verbatim here. They may perhaps economize in the, but there's some thought processes that are interesting to follow. So I'd say they may underestimate the quality of the minutes and their value for council as is.
Thank you. Do you want to move receipts?
Yes, I do.
Moved by Councilor Anderson, second by Councilor French. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We need to move receipt for the Public Art Select Committee from November 6th, moved by Councilor French, seconded by Councilor Hurford. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We have a recommendation from that committee that the Public Art Committee support funding of up to $5,000 for building the Parklet project as presented by R.S. Squamish. And can we do this together, Robin?
For the banner and the art
Yeah,
squash?
the Parklet.
Sure, you can do that.
Yep, and then the Public Art Committee commits $6,000 to the street banner competition call for artists. Moved by Councilor French, seconded by Councilor Stoner. Any comments, Councilor French? Cool project.
Yeah, definitely cool projects. The Parklet is a group of citizens who are volunteering their time. This is actually, they came to us with 4 projects. We opted to have them start with this one as somewhat of a pilot and see how it goes. And I'm anticipating the other 3 projects they have in mind will come next year. And then the street banner money. This is an attempt to have public art funded by the public art budget. Like this money that's set aside for public art should go to projects like this, because right now, as my understanding, it's the operations department that is, for the most part, covering the banner project. And the committee felt that this $6,000 and this commitment is consistent with what the Public Art Committee should be funding.
Okay. I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for that. Council staff in camera items announced. We have one that the following Squamish Library Board members be reappointed to the Squamish Library Board for a 2-year term ending December 2021. Caitlin Rattray, Molly Ludon, Patricia Payne, Mallory Eddy. Someone like to. No, we just, we don't need to. It's already moved. Just make sure everyone knows that those 4 wonderful people are volunteering with our library board. Thank you very much to them. Open question period for clarification related to agenda items. Anybody got a question?
Excuse me, Mayor Elliott, did we skip by unscheduled public attendance? We do have some folks in the audience.
I called for unscheduled public attendance at the beginning.
Oh,
No
I
one
see.
spoke, so there's nothing under that item.
Very good.
So we are on the open question period.
Did we miss an opportunity?
Did you want to speak this evening?
Yes.
Yes, that happens right at the beginning when I call for unscheduled
I
public attendance.
was told in an email that it was going to be discussed tonight, so that's why we're here.
There is right now the open question period for clarifications related to any agenda items. If you would like to ask a question.
I'd like to ask a question. John Harvey, Vancouver Access Society, and we sent a letter to council asking about a permissive tax exemption, which we were very hopeful that we were going to receive. And then we just got a letter denying us that application. So we're interested as to why. And is it because you want us to do a community enhancement grant rather than a permissive tax exemption? We were under the assumption as a small not-for-profit charity that we would be eligible in the service we're trying to provide the town, that we would be eligible for a permissive tax exemption. And so the question is, why?
Do you want me to? I'm looking at Ms. Matthews, but I can also.
Thank you, through Mayor Elliott. My understanding that council looked at this at the committee of the whole on September 30th. They were provided a number of just-in-time or some just-in-time information and some principles around permissive tax exemptions. Permissive tax exemptions, again, we do ask council to take cautious review of those. They're a very restrictive type of granting tool, and we want to be careful. So there was a number of principles provided. My understanding is that council determined that this particular request or application was not going to receive a PTE this year. I think from what I could tell from the conversation, we did provide a significant amount of seed funding, so the startup costs to the campground, $38,000 of granting. It was making a suitable net profit, and therefore be able to bear the cost of the taxes, which is about 3% of their net profit that they took away from their financial information. And that they're now poised to provide a service like other businesses in the community provide. Unless council has other input, that's my understanding.
That was my recollection.
Well, as an organization struggling to start this thing from scratch, with tons of volunteerism behind it, it would seem a really great gesture on the part of the District of Squamish to aid this little not-for-profit with a small subsidy, which would go a long way for a number of years. We are definitely in need of a couple $100,000 to build the campground properly. We hardly have any infrastructure now. We don't even have water. And that's a different story, of course, but we are a small community-based organization doing such a good job for the town and for, we've been working closely with Bylaw. We're certainly mitigating the van life issues on the street, and we would hope that council could reconsider. And, you know, I mean, sure, you help with some seed money, but it is worth now, you know, it's 300,000's gone into it, and more than that probably. And it would be appreciated. And again, we would have applied for a community enhancement grant. It's only $1,500 a year, but we didn't find out until after the grant deadline. So it seems an unfortunate situation where, had we found out earlier, well, we could have applied for a community enhancement grant to help us in this small way, a continued help in this small way, to aid us in support of building this very important community amenity. We consider it a community amenity. We don't own anything, it's owned by the Crown, and we're doing this all for community. And we're providing camping at $15 and $10 a night. Now, this is better than any other camp spot in the region. And again, it would be a situation we would hope that municipal local government would be able to help our little charity build this slowly in the next few years. So I hope that there's a way that we could reconsider it.
We can't reconsider permissive tax exemptions at this time. Those are concluded. you know, council is working hard not to expand permissive tax exemptions, but really follow a principled approach and limit them. As Ms. Matthews said, there was about $58,000 of net profit there, which we felt the society could absorb so they could absorb the $1,500 permissive tax exemption in providing a campground service. Other campgrounds operate in our district. We do not provide them permissive tax exemptions.
Yeah, they're
And
private
so
government.
there was profit there in order to support that payment, which is part of the reasoning that council didn't rule in favor of a permissive tax exemption at this time.
Okay. Well, there, you answered my questions. Thank you.
Any council or staff announcements? Council French?
Yeah, I had the honor of being the MC at the Remembrance Day ceremonies on November the 11th, and it was a great turnout. It was very well organized by a number of people, a number of organizations, and I just wanted to take a moment to thank all of those who were involved and the large number of people that came out to take part in the ceremony. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Ms. Bengill?
Got a few. So attended a jazz night. Sort of district's own, I didn't realize until the night of, but our own Keely Kidner was tickling the ivories with Jeff Warren from Quest and Kristen Price. So I didn't realize that the Kristen Price trio was a local trio, but just fantastic. And then Connor Lund, who sort of runs the sound these days at Antrim Park, he was here with his jazz quintet. Just incredible music. So that was a great night. Was at the youth engagement session at Quest, and again, just the enthusiasm of everyone. Really exciting to see. So it's great to be included in that. I wanted to mention, so last week we had a pretty big day, and I have tended in the past to get anxious with some of those topics, but I was feeling pretty good, and I've been feeling pretty good the last few weeks coming out of the two conferences that I've been at, and I didn't have a chance to speak about it last week, but just the shift I've seen in the last, even just few months in terms of the willingness of people to get moving on the climate crisis, the feeling that there's strong community support there. There's a sense of optimism and happiness that I just haven't felt in a while, and maybe it's just a little blip, but it kind of feels good. And David Miller was one of the presenters at Climate Leaders Institute, so the former, I think, 3-time mayor of Toronto, and he was kind of taken a bit back because thinking, well, one of the things I heard was that you guys said one of the most important things to dealing with climate change is to have fun, and I haven't heard that before. And he said, I really think that's true, and it's kind of fantastic to see, and I think that kind of encapsulated the mood there and that I've been feeling. And so for those reasons, despite some of the tough topics we're still dealing with, feeling pretty optimistic about the future. And finally, I just wanted to remind everyone about the powwow at Totem Hall all weekend long. It's incredible. It can get pretty loud at times, but some of the infants still manage to sleep through it. And, it's a great time, and incredible regalia, incredible dancing, incredible singing, incredible drumming. So definitely try and make it out if you can.
Thank you. Anybody else? Just want to thank the Community Foundation for hosting the S&M documentary at the library on the 6th and hosting a vital conversation afterwards. So this is building on their vital signs report, and they want to host a number of sort of what they call vital conversations over the year in our community on things that matter, and that was very well attended and such a vital conversation about homelessness and addiction and how we support resiliency in our community around folks that are grappling with those issues, whether it's themselves or loved ones. So it was a great show of community compassion that evening. And if you haven't seen that film, you can rent it on Vimeo. It's amazing. I want to thank some of the builders who participated in the Passive House tour. I had an opportunity to go and look at one of the passive homes that's being built. So great to see some of our builders leading the way on this and opening up their projects so that other people can learn. There were a number of architects that were in the house at the same time I was. One that came from as far away as West, I think. So that was pretty cool. Opened the Squamish Eagle Watch Volunteer Interpreter Program on Saturday the 9th. And such great work those volunteers do in terms of supporting tourists who come, but also the amazing work they do in schools. And as I told them, everything I've learned about eagles, I've learned from my children because they participate in that program every year. So just a fantastic group of volunteers that are doing that in our community. Remembrance Day, again, was well attended. I always think that that is our community at its best at that event. And then was with the Fraser Basin Council Youth Cohort on sustainability on Saturday. And had a chance to sit down with them and talk about municipal government's role in addressing climate and zero waste. And also really engaged youth in that endeavor. So thanks to the Fraser Basin Council for organizing that. Okay. With that, I think we're done. Motion to adjourn. Moved by Councilor French, second by Councilor Ricker. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.